Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm Lieutenant General Tom Miller, current Sustainment Center Commander, and thrilled to have the first Sustainment Center Commander with us today, Lieutenant General retired Bruce Litchfield. So, sir, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, General Miller. What a great time to be here, and an opportunity to celebrate all that has happened over the last 10 years in the command, and quite honestly, since World War II, the maintenance and operation sustainment complex that have been involved in keeping our Air Force ready.
It is remarkable to think about. 10 years goes really fast, and when we look at everything, the 3 complexes, the 2 supply chain wings, the air base wings, all the 2 letters do for the Air Force, it's probably worth it for us at the 10-year point to reflect back on. It was not always structured this way. There was a vision for how could we make us a sustainment enterprise, with things we talk about all the time now, like they've always been that way. Common goals, the leadership model, art of the possible. These are things that are just part of the fabric of Sustainment Center, and have been. And if you've joined Sustainment Center and within the last decade, there might be a notion that, hey, it's kind of always been this way. There were certainly outstanding pieces of what's now the Sustainment Center in their structure since World War II, just like General Litchfield described. But pulling them together, because we're providing one Department of the Air Force readiness engine, was really a vision that I first learned about from General Litchfield when I was Colonel Miller. Probably 11 years ago, and we went on a journey for that change to stand up Sustainment Center.
Yeah, so first, you're absolutely right. We didn't just inherit this and start it from scratch. Like we said, the complexes, the depots, the supply chain piece has been around since World War II. That's what they were stood up for the mobilization to keep, at that time, the Army Air Corps, and then eventually the Air Force, to be able to fight and win any place, any time. But when we stood up the Sustainment Center, it was an evolution, but it was also a very big turning point for our nation and our department and our Air Force. And it really was because of the budget crisis. So at that time, there was a call to action to say, how could we get more efficient and more effective? We happened to be on an airplane coming back from Afghanistan, which I think we saw at that time Colonel Tom Miller on the flight line. And the 4-star asked, what can we do as a command to really help the Air Force save money? And that's when there was quite a few general officers on the plane, and we said, well, there's a concept that we've been thinking about for 10 years prior, and that's to really take a more life cycle, a more enterprise approach to how we do business in Air Force Material Command. And that was really the generation of the thought that says, now is the time to do something different. And so what we then did was we created the 5-center construct. And what was really significant about that on the plane ride back is that we were asked, how do we go do that? And the AFMC Commanders Conference happened to be the next week. And we said, you're going to have all the leadership within the command in one place. And that would be a time that we would do a workshop, turn the Commanders Conference from a briefing scenario that we typically had and a status update into a workshop of how we could create the 5-center construct. And so on the plane back, the boss said, we're going to do it. And all of a sudden, that Commanders Conference got turned from an agenda on its head to be a workshop for how we created the 5-center construct. And when the Sustainment Center was one of the centers, we made a decision at that time that we weren't just going to go consolidate and do efficiencies for one time. It was going to be, how do we actually get the most performance, the most potential out of the national assets and capabilities and really resources of people we had. And that was the genesis on a trip back from Afghanistan that you were actually a part of when we went to see you in generating aircraft when you were deployed.
What a sequence of events, and I didn't know that until just now. So I left Afghanistan, went to Hill to be the Ogden ALC at the time vice commander to General Bush. I was there for about a month and a half or 2 months, and General Bush calls me. He says, "Hey Tom, we'll get you a crummy plaque or something, but you don't work for us anymore. You're going to work for General Litchfield, working on the stand-up of this thing called Sustainment Center." And he has a very dry sense of humor, and does a much better job than I'm describing of it. But I had no idea what that would entail. Fortunately for me, Ms. Trixie Brewer, an outstanding, just recently retired, but outstanding logistician, leader, many things, had a lot of experience with how to do reorganization and understood the different roles and missions, especially within supply chain and maintenance within AFMC. And so we became co-leads for you, and put a team together that would do this stand-up of Sustainment Center. That team had more than 50 GS-14s and GS-15s in all locations. And we had 3 times a week production meeting telecons. Before Teams and before anything else, we would do the telecons to be working action items, the change to make sure that we would do no harm to the mission we were doing as we were transitioning, and make sure that we had thought of all those things that were necessary to make a center that was multi-zip code and went beyond the one location. There's some complexity to doing that, and to throw a big net to make sure all the voices were heard from all locations. And there were just numerous great, incredible leaders that were on those teams that tirelessly worked to make sure that it went in the right direction.
Yeah, so I may have been guilty of reaching out to, at that time, Colonel Tom Miller to bring him into the team, and of course Trixie Brewer. But I mentioned the workshop, and General Hoffman was at then the AFMC 4-star commander, and what we briefed to him during the workshop was a notion for AFSC concept of operations and how it would work. And we didn't have any way, shape, or form the details. It was really, I'll call it at the 100,000 foot level of how we wanted the center to operate. But it was all about, I'll call it centralized planning, centralized control, and decentralized operations, which is really how you got to the multi-center operation. And you used the right word. The sustainment that we do at this level within the depots and within the enterprise supply chain is highly complex. It is a very much an integrated and integration systems engineering problem that when it all works well, it's an amazing system to watch. And so what we wanted to do, and when I said that when we stood up the center, we didn't just want to take efficiencies because of the consolidation. We actually wanted to operate much better than we had. The sum of the parts were going to equal greater than any individual. And so that was the whole notion of why we brought you two together to really run the I'll call it the subject matter experts across the command, and said, if you had a blank piece of paper, how would you do this better, and how would you then do it? And it was really part of the change management process.
Right.
I want to make pretty clear, no one likes change, and these I'll call it federated institutions had been operating for almost 50 years when this happened as independent entities. And so there was a great apprehension about bringing together, who would lose the identity, who would gain the power, who would lose the power, how would we, you can't do that, we don't do it, we do it differently than them. But by giving this group of leaders within now the Sustainment Center the opportunity to build their own organization, to build the processes, to create the tool suites that we needed to be able to do it, and utilizing the leadership models and methodologies and the early, I'll call it very early stages of what Art of the Possible has turned into, turned them from what I would consider skeptics into advocates, because quite frankly, they were the architects of what we put in play. And I know you know this. The other part was to get folks that were going to be, I'll call it senior enough leaders, but not the senior, not at they had much more potential, much more growth. As you said, you're a colonel, now you're a 3-star, to identify those leaders that were going to then grow up and take this command to the next level. And that's why I will tell you right now, when I walk around and I still see things in play that we put in place right at the onset of the command, it was because of the ownership of the leaders that now are eventually running this organization, and it's so much fun to watch.
And we were learning, I'm thinking back to, at the time, the 3 vice commanders of the 3 depots were Colonel Tom Miller, Colonel Stacy Hawkins, and Colonel Chris Hill, and we would do phone calls to learn what is now the radiator chart, and is now, and learn what we call now Art of the Possible. And we were, quite frankly, students to some incredible civil servants who had, from a systems engineering, theory of constraints based process, not emotion, follow the facts, all the things that just make sense. We were going to school, learning that a couple of times a week, learning from, Teresa Ferris, Janice Wood, Connie Davis. Were teaching the colonels how to do that, because frankly, it wasn't something we had a background from our field level maintenance. Maintenance expertise, maintenance officers learn that at the field level. How to operate at an enterprise level, the complexity you were just describing, and how to get synergy across multiple organizations to produce that readiness. Really, we became students of that. And on Art of the Possible now, part of the description, since I was at a location where I was really learning that, there are extremely talented people that had incredible processes. To describe why it was important to have one playbook, really, I use a sports analogy. You could be the best high school athlete in your state. You go to a college, and that coach is going to say, hey, you're really ridiculously talented at whatever position you play. But as a team, we've got to know what each other are doing. We have to have the same vocabulary. We can't talk past each other. Even worse than not understanding what each other are saying, probably the worst is to use words and misunderstand what we're talking about and go past each other. And Art of the Possible has done that. I mean, we go to each location, and it's not just in the industrial environment. It's in a security forces squadron. It's waiting for, guard mount processes. It's the pharmacy in a med group. It's safety reports going through the staffing process. It's hiring practices for civil servants. It's all of that. And to have that common playbook, the common goals of a vocabulary that we all know what each other means, that's change too. And change is sometimes hard. But once you're through that change, and if you're involved in the change process, there's buy-in, there's understanding. And there's a generation of logistics general officers that learned from that experience. And I think it served our Air Force even when we went to other positions out in the MAGCOMs and sometimes come back.
Yeah, you really touched on some really important elements of what really creates, I think the magic of AFSC. And really, when I look at the sustainment, when we talk about the cost of readiness, it's the thing that this center can do more so than any other entity in the Air Force, is to drive up readiness and drive down the cost of what it does to sustain that readiness. And you mentioned the civil servants, and I think we cannot overemphasize their importance to what they mean to this Air Force and to the readiness of the Air Force, whether it's the artisans, the mechanics, the technicians, or the professionals that we have that run the operation in leadership positions, whether it's the engineers or even the production specialists. It really is what is the heart and glue of what makes this center run. And what we did with Art of the Possible is we gave a science to it. The truth is that for a long time, and what we used to hear military leaders come in, well, we don't control it. The aircraft gets to decide how the work is done, or the repair components, or the part failures drive the supply chain. But when you dissect it, it really is not. There's a methodology behind it that enables you to take the variables and get them controlled, and then make decisions based on math and science and operations. And what we saw almost instantly when we went to the consistent science across the board is people could help each other.
Right.
So whether you were at Hill working on C-130s, or Robbins working on C-130s, or at Tinker working on B-52s, the problems that you were experiencing, the constraints that you were seeing, were actually very common. They were really, we had that prior to that attributed it to the aircraft, but really it was the matter of when we were diagnosing it during the PDM process,
right.
What engineering support we were, what tools that we're using for the. This gave us a methodology that we could share across all of the PDM lines. That was really wonderful. And then in the commodities piece of this, and the parts repair, having the methodology for flow, understanding what the takt times were for getting parts through, absolutely critical to us. And that fed the supply chain. And when we really worked on the supply chain to get it tied to the flying hour program, to specific weapon systems, then we had the ability to synergize across all the operations. But maybe most important, I think, was we created, I would say, an ability to be able to talk to the rest of the Air Force. And at that time, I will say I was very lucky, and I got to go to the Coronas. And General Wolfenbarger, who was our 4-star, always put sustainment as one of the main and key briefings at the Corona, to brief all the 4 and 3 stars that we had in the Air Force about the cost of readiness, what we were going to do, how do we operate better with the field, how does the inspections in the field feed the depots so that they can be better and more efficient in turning it back. And it gave us, I would say, a hammer at the Air Force level, credibility at the Air Force level, to take our art and science and be able to tell the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force how we were going to do business. And then most important, when we started driving out cost and driving output up, and we were given more capability to the field at less cost, then that was really what took off and what made this, I would say, mainstream in our Air Force time.
Absolutely mainstream. And watching now, so it goes after the science, not the emotion.
That's right.
Which decreases people's defensive mechanisms, because you're now attacking a problem, not someone's personality or otherwise. And what I've seen now in every MAGCOM is proliferation of theory of constraints based. It's not exactly the same. It doesn't look exactly the same, but the principles are absolutely the same. So, Half A4 has worked with Tesseract, AMC, Global Strike, ACC, and others. PACAF, USAFE, AATC, and AFSC are all applying theory of constraints-based processes to field level maintenance, supply, and other activities. So I think at first there might have been, a sense of, well, for Art of the Possible within the Sustainment Center, of course you guys can do that. You've got people that are there for years, and there's longevity, and there's continuity, and there's an understanding of it, and you don't have the turnover especially on the military maintenance side, that you might experience. But once some of the logistics career broadening officers and other professionals that went to the field brought this, hey, there's really something to this. There's really something to us figuring out what the constraint is, optimizing for the constraint, and maybe it's a facility. Maybe it's a career field. Maybe it's a piece of support equipment. Maybe the $2,000 piece of support equipment is the constraint that keeps the $100 million airplane from flying. Maybe we should buy or get those available to the mechanic at the point of need. So the mechanic's the surgeon putting their hand out for the scalpel versus going and searching for scalpels back in a room somewhere, which a surgeon would never do. Once that started to take hold, I think what was really encouraging to me is it's encouraging but expected that the maintenance group commander would get that. What's really encouraging to me is the wing commanders that get that. Knowing that the wing commander, and I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, 5 wings in 3 different MAGCOMs that I know of, that the wing commander was personally convinced that embracing this at field level maintenance will make a readiness difference. And so that in conjunction with kind of the Venn diagram of applying it within the sustainment enterprise and producing parts and software, commodities, aircraft, engines, missiles, all the above, going back out to the field. Now you've got the synergy of this understanding, field level, depot level, enterprise level sustainment operations. And there's program offices that have overlap and understanding there as well. So then when we look at how you manage the life cycle of a weapon system, what are we going to do going forward? That common vernacular has helped us, and I think there's no going back, and I think that's great for our Air Force.
Yeah, so I mean, in listening to you, I have to be honest with you. It's great. I'll say heartwarming to hear that we're making a difference for our Air Force, because that was the whole intent of it. And so, readiness, the cost of readiness, the ability to operate globally, the ability to integrate the supply chain in with the maintenance is just an amazing piece. But there's one other thing that I don't want to forget, because it's kind of really important, and probably was one of my main priorities, that each one of these centers are part of the community by which they live. I mean, if you think of Tinker, and how Tinker started, it was a private citizen that bought the land. If I go to Robbins and I look at the creation of the Wellston Depot, or you go to Hillfield and the integration in with the community, there's such a big community partner. And I think that what I've seen and what I've witnessed is that they really now believe in the power of what a 3-star over this center nurturing the locations has not just made it, I'll call it status quo, it has made it much better. And in fact, I'll share this one with you. I told you about the plane ride back with General Hoffman and his willingness to go forward with this. There was an elected official who was opposed to this in a very big way. He did not want his center to lose I'll call it clout that he would have, and felt that the 3-star operating at a different location would maybe minimize the importance of that base. And so in terms of what we did was we went into that representative every 2 months and said, this is what we're going to go do, and then after that we would report on the status. And after 2 years, the elected official raised his hands and said, I was wrong. This was the right thing to do for the Air Force. This was the right thing to do for the Sustainment Center, and you and your team have made it better for us to operate. So if you think about, not only what we needed to do for the Air Force, what we needed to do to raise the potential and delivery mechanisms for the sustainment operation, but then strengthen the community relations and strengthen the advocacy for the bases, I would go check, check, check. And then maybe the third thing that we were really prioritizing was to develop the acumen of the future leaders of the base. And I know that you have a big proponent and quite frankly have strengthened it well beyond what I had even ever envisioned, the training mechanism, so that every leader that comes into AFSC goes through a training program. And I will say, I can remember this first speech I get. If you're just coming in new into this sustainment complex and you think you've got a bright idea to go do something, I want you to put that out of your head, because you can do more damage than you can good until you learn how this all operates. And so you have taken that to a much bigger level, and I think that's what's going to really create the synergy and kind of the flywheel momentum to take it to the next level, because you are training the leaders of the future. You are training both military and civilian, and really putting out the processes and still making them even stronger, so that, I don't even think you've seen the full potential as much as how great it's been operating to this point. So good on you. Congratulations. I think that's the beauty of what the Air Force does, right? It's sad when a leader goes out, but the great news is we have another one come in to take it to the next level, and I think that's exactly what you're doing, and that's what you're implementing. So it's fun to watch, I have to tell you.
40,000 person team doing that, which is awesome to watch. So I was talking to a cadet that was about to get commissioned, an Air Force ROTC cadet, and what I was describing to him is that in the 80s, when I was in Air Force ROTC, I was thinking I was going to serve in an Air Force that was very focused on a peer adversary, Soviet Union. I quite frankly did not know. If you had asked me to name the countries on a map in the Middle East, I would have been challenged to do it, save a few. And as I entered into the Air Force, the last 32 years I've been in the Air Force, we've been largely focused on counter-violent extremism, a rotational CENTCOM model. And now, as we look at what's happened, Russia's aggression, invasion, and war against the people of Ukraine, when I look at that, it feels much more like the pacing threat of China, Russia. These are peer adversaries, state adversaries that have much more existential threat to the United States of America. Not that operations in CENTCOM weren't important; they were vitally important. But from a readiness engine perspective, it's going to require us to think differently and produce differently for something that could be competition and potentially conflict with somebody that's on a scale we haven't seen since World War II. So what the things that we would need to do from a readiness standpoint for aircraft availability, the way we would sustain the field supply chain, and doing that in an affordable way so that we're able to buy the readiness you've described, sir, multiple times. If the difference can be made inside a sustainment center so that we can buy more readiness. I think the United States of America is going to need more from its Air Force, and I think the professionals within Sustainment Center are in a great position to do that.
Yeah, and I think that, and we very much capitalize on that. The beauty is that you have 10 years under your belt to perfect what you need to do to take it to the next level, to be able to sustain that high tempo operation, right? I mean, the difference between the terrorist operation is, I know it's going to sound strange, it's really a low volume readiness requirement.
Right.
The near peer is high volume, and it's going to be long durations, high volume, everything got to be there. So the first 10 years may have been the stretching. Right. The next 10 years is where you're going to move to the marathon sprint, and you're as positioned to do that as you could ever want to be. And you got the leadership team to make that happen. So I think that's good. I think that you can talk about the last 10 years, but now what's the future hold, and I think that whether you like it or not, even in the next 10 years, the predominance of the force is going to be what you got.
Right.
Now we're going to add new technology, but the predominance out there is going to be what you have, and most of that is sustained in the complex of AFSC.
It is. The organic industrial base of the Air Force is in the Sustainment Center.
That's right.
And so big responsibility, but incredible professionals that can do it, and we have high confidence in them. And General Litchfield, I want to thank you for your time, for coming here and spending it with us. There were absolutely many times in the Sustainment Center stand-up that I was working the task, and Trixie was walking me through, here's the next milestone we need to make. But I didn't have a vision for what all this would go and be put together. I didn't have the vocabulary or the experience or the knowledge of what it all could be. You were pushing us hard because readiness depended on it. We had to be successful. And just the things that you learn in the journey of being a sustainment professional in the Air Force. You get opportunities, and they're put in front of you sometimes. And I want to thank you for your dedication to this organization, to all the people that you still go check in with, unsupervised, and go out on the shop floor and talk to the WG10 mechanic that's making a difference every single day and producing readiness out of this building and the other buildings at all the locations. So thanks for your service.
Well, thank you for recognizing. And I mean, I've told you, and I'm very open about this. I may not wear my uniform every day anymore, but there's a lot in me that starts with the Air Force blue, but AFSC is no question something that I will always work to try to make better, even if it's behind the scenes, and I don't want to be that guy that gets in your way, but I do want to make sure that it's successful. And one of the kind of interesting questions that I get in the side note is, this, like you said, this is a 10-year anniversary, but it's been a legacy. And when we created that shield was about two things. It was about recognizing the legacy that we had as an Air Force, right? So that the three jets that are taken off that look like were the three ALCs, even though the three ALCs were one time five, but we really had three for the longest point in time. But it also kind of represents the Air Force Memorial and the way the spires work and going to the clouds. So we wanted to honor the legacy of where we came from, but also where we're going to the future, and the future's bright and the future's up, and you always look up. Right? There is no looking back. The team that you have and what you have in place, and really the legacy now of this command, I think 10 years you can have a legacy. The legacy of this command is that we're going to make it better tomorrow than it is today. We're going to make it better next week than it is today. And I think that's when we talk about what the Air Force needs, what the Air Force expects, and and the contributions you can make to it, it's always about driving to a better state, a higher state, which is really why the aircraft are going up to the space and up to the clouds, and that was purposeful. There was no, it was designed at this table.
It was.
And it was done so that we could honor the past, but also really understand that the future is unlimited and we can go as high as we want to take it. And I know that's what you get up every morning to do, is to take it to the next level. So thank you for having this opportunity. Thank you for, I will say, remembering the 10-year anniversary. And what I want, I can't wait. I really can't wait till we get to the 20-year anniversary and see how it's taken our Air Force to the next level. And to be honest with you, I know that we're, as a country, when you look at where we are right now, the world doesn't look like a very nice place. But I have utmost faith in those that are serving, supporting, and defending our nation, that we're going to get through this. We're going to find I'm going to call it the silver lining at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get through it. And we as a nation are going to be stronger for it. We're going to be better for it. And the world is going to be better because of what we do and how we do it as a nation. And you're a big part of that. So thank you.
Thank you.